Mario Bros. And its style of platforming has become such a classic within the gaming industry. While this style of platforming gameplay took a bit of a hiatus for the series once 3D games started rolling around and establishing their presence, the past over a decade now has featured titles that return to this 2D style of Mario Bros. Classic-inspired gameplay, along with new features thrown in. Welcome back to our new series called Challenge Mode, the show where I beat games in incredibly challenging and strange ways for you all to enjoy my misery. I've been streaming for over 2 years now, and over that time I've done some incredibly crazy challenges on stream, a lot of which are things nobody would ever even consider. In today's episode, we'll be hopping into New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe on the Switch, that's a mouthful, and more specifically into the Super Luigi U part of it, because the lower time limit means a far greater challenge. For this challenge, I'll be playing one-handed and using only a single Joy-Con as a controller. Do I need a spoiler warning for Super Luigi U? Roll the intro. Mario saw his debut as Jumpman back in 1981 against Donkey Kong, and then later gained more traction in Mario Bros. In 1983. In 1985, the world saw the first release in the Super Mario Bros. Series, which featured platforming used as a model for several games until today, platforming or not, and constantly had Mario's princess in another castle. Also, I kid you not when I say that this game is used as a model for so many other games. In my video game classes at university, we've actually examined World 1-1 to see how it's able to introduce most of the game mechanics to the player very quickly. Well, I mean, among other things we studied in those classes. Later in 1990, Super Mario World released on the SNES. After this console, the video game industry began pursuing 3D games more actively than in the past, and then after that it became the new standard. Mario's platforming adventures stuck to 3D until New Super Mario Bros. On the DS in 2006. As the new in the title implied, this was a reimagining of the classic Super Mario Bros. 2D platforming formula. It wound up doing way better for itself than initially thought, and showed that players out there were still interested in this style of gameplay as well. While the 3D adventures were still the bigger releases, there was still a place for 2D titles. This spurred on New Super Mario Bros. Wii in 2009, one of the games I dumped countless hours into as a kid and would always be playing with friends. 4-player Super Mario Bros. Was so good, the chaos that ensues was insane. You could be working well together, or interfering with each other and constantly yelling at each other from across the room. I actually remember once playing the in-store demo of New Super Mario Bros. Wii at a Best Buy, and I started speedrunning one of the sand levels and was able to clear it without ever stopping my run. A small crowd of people gathered and applauded when I cleared the level. That was a good day. In 2012, Nintendo released more New Super Mario Bros. Titles on their new consoles of the Wii U and the 3DS. 1 year later, in 2013, Nintendo released a DLC, which was its own standalone game as well, of New Super Luigi U, celebrating the year of Luigi. This title did not feature Mario, and the Bros is crossed out on the title. This was Luigi's own 2D adventure. While the game appears like a slightly recolored Super Mario Bros. U on the surface, the levels are redesigned to create a more difficult experience and account for the reduced time limit of 100 seconds per level, making each stage feel like a speedrun of its own. Then, just last year in January 2019, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe released on the Switch, which included New Super Mario Bros. U and Super Luigi U. Personally, I would have preferred a new 2D Super Mario title rather than a port of a game from 7 years ago at the time, but I get it. The Wii U didn't do particularly well for itself, but the Switch is doing very well. So when it comes to countless games from the Wii U being ported over, and sometimes improved too, onto the Switch, most players who play it will most likely be experiencing these games for the first time. This game gives you separate save files for New Super Mario Bros. U and Super Luigi U, and has that kind of interface that gives that feel where it would be awesome to 100% it. As of writing this though, I've still only done my one-handed playthrough of Super Luigi U, and haven't touched Super Mario Bros. U yet since there's so many other games to play on stream and challenge runs to complete, though I did nearly 100% the original on the Wii U. I also never got the chance to hop into it since Mario & Luigi Bowser Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey were released at just about the same time, and this title kept me occupied on stream for the next several months among many other games. With the Switch version of these games came the ability to play with a single Joy-Con, which we will be using as our controller of choice for this playthrough. The story features Bowser kidnapping Peach and the player needing to save her. Yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say about the story. Now, playing Super Luigi U with one hand and one Joy-Con is very difficult. If a controller such as a Pro Controller or two Joy-Cons were used instead, you could use various different fingers for different buttons. With one sideways Joy-Con, however, the control stick is so close to the buttons that it becomes more efficient to just use your thumb to use both the control stick and the run and jump buttons. This makes changing direction very, very hard and makes the entire game feel like you're playing with ice physics.
You'll jump a bit higher, but you're also more prone to skidding.
The easiest levels are the ones where you can just run and jump and never change directions, but few are like this. The hardest levels are the ones that involve changing direction frequently, or carrying something, as the controls make both very difficult. Pressing R to pick things up is still possible with the index finger, but a bit awkward. Keep in mind, that's picking up things like ice blocks. To pick up things like Baby Yoshis, you need to hold the run button. The controls overall were made most difficult, as previously mentioned, by using the thumb for the control stick and the run and jump buttons. Now, when it comes to holding the run button, whether you need it for running or for carrying something, it's so hard to change directions without releasing the run button. This means you'll find yourself doing a whole lot of walking when you change direction, which makes it hard to pick up the momentum that you need to avoid certain obstacles. As well, every stage has a 100-second time limit, with exceptions being to stages with bosses, which will give you an additional 100 seconds just before you start the boss. That means that if you do too much walking or get stuck trying to get past certain jumps or obstacles for too long, the time limit will kill you. I found myself using several continues throughout this playthrough. It requires a lot of patience. Also, when I was jumping over things while changing direction, I found myself leaning with the Joy-Con a lot, as if it were a Wii steering wheel, and if somehow the lean would somehow help me get over just the last little bit of area I needed to clear. I don't know if this is because I'd flex on friends by beating them at Mario Kart one-handed, or because using such a small controller with only one hand with few buttons being available to you just gives that feel like tilting is what you're supposed to do, but I moved that Joy-Con around a lot. Now, this challenge presented some serious roadblocks. Levels where you could just run left to right usually weren't too terribly bad, but many levels weren't like that. The hardest levels were definitely the towers. Instead of going left to right, you find yourself going from bottom to top, all while platforming and avoiding obstacles. Combined with the 100-second time limit makes every time you fall or fail a jump a few times make it feel like you're playing, I don't know, getting over it. Moving obstacles such as spiked balls that roll from both sides that force you to change direction several times becomes very difficult to avoid. As previously mentioned, it is very challenging to continue holding the run button while also changing direction, meaning you'll be walking a lot of the time and not having the momentum to properly avoid these obstacles. In these stages, the dry bones caused me way more difficulty than they should have, which could have just been terrible luck. I once accidentally somehow placed one on top of a block platform I needed to make it past. About 10 seconds later, the same one reformed under my feet to force me into jumping off his head at the moment I was right underneath another dry bones. Falling down is frequent. Not getting where you need to in time is also frequent. The towers and castles is probably where I saw the most of my continues used. Now, keep in mind that the game typically only saves after each tower or castle. That means that if you're especially struggling on a stage like one of these towers or castles and wind up using a continue, you've now been sent all the way back to several stages ago and have to try your best to make it back with as many lives as possible. The second most difficult stages, I would say, are probably the ones where the player is expected to carry a Baby Yoshi. As I mentioned, you need to hold the run button in order to carry them, which is very, very difficult to keep holding if you change direction or stop running. It's not impossible, but tricky, and physically hurts. This means that anytime you slow down or change direction, you risk chucking the poor Yoshi straight into the abyss. This happened to me constantly. No! With the pink Yoshi, you can at least shake the Joy-Con in order to inflate it and float across the stage for a while, but requires you to land and refresh it. This means that you would almost never have to change direction, but will oftentimes still have to slow down so that you can land properly, and need to be careful not to chuck Yoshi during your landing maneuvers, but pulling it off means being able to largely skip the stage. The abilities of the other Yoshis aren't quite as helpful for this challenge, and you need to be incredibly careful with them, though you can only take your time so much because of the 100-second time limit. When it comes to other notable roadblocks on this journey, the Haunted Mansion stages, whoo boy. You know how annoying these stages are normally? Yeah, now imagine it one-handed. Also, remember how I mentioned how changing directions in this feels like constant ice physics? Yeah, now throw that on a stage that actually has ice physics. It just becomes like extra ice physics. My strategy when it came to these ones were just hold right and hope. And speaking of changing directions, the bosses. You have to be so careful during them, because the bosses are constantly changing direction and forcing you to maneuver in strange ways. The bosses may wind up stumping you for a good while. One of the most difficult things to do in this challenge, which helps with bosses but is also required for certain stages, is wall jumping. To wall jump, you need to be holding in the direction of the wall you're on while you press the jump button. So when you're using your thumb for both the direction and the jump button, this makes it very difficult to wall jump properly and means falling into several pits. Eventually, I got relatively used to it with this control scheme, but it was never exactly easy. Heck, this entire challenge never got to a point where it was exactly easy. Isn't that something? Is there gonna be a secret block here? Nope, that's just a ceiling. Get there! Oh no! Oh no! If you'd like to try this challenge yourself, you'll need either a Wii U or a Switch, along with Super Luigi U. On the Wii U, the closest thing to a single Joy-Con is a sideways Wiimote, though you do have to stretch your fingers out a bit far to hit all the buttons. A Pro Controller is another choice, on both the Wii U and the Switch, but doesn't have as much of a challenge as, say, a single Joy-Con, considering you can actually use different fingers for the other buttons, instead of being forced to use a thumb to cover the stick and two buttons. Good luck trying to use the gamepad, unless you've got fingers longer than mine, or an experienced piano player with long fingers or something. On the Switch, when it comes to a single Joy-Con, I prefer using the right Joy-Con over the left. The control stick is near the center of the controller, which makes it a bit easier to hold the center of the controller while playing, I find. If you're left-handed, don't try this challenge. Heck, even if you're right-handed, don't try this challenge, honestly. But if you want to anyway, here's what you do. Use the edge of your thumb to cover the control stick, while around the first joint should be covering the run button, with just under it being the jump button, being B and A respectively on a right Joy-Con. When everything goes perfectly, you can be holding down the run button while being able to tap the jump button. Just good luck turning around. You may need to release the run button to do so, which may not be what you need when you're trying to avoid obstacles or not yeet Yoshi to the Shadow Realm. In cases where you need to press the R button, you can use your index finger to do so. Alternatively, you can try placing the controller on a table and using a top-down approach to try to hit the buttons, but this may be a bit difficult to keep track of what's going on in such a tiny space, plus you have to worry about the controller sliding, and you lose your ability to hit the R button or shake the Joy-Con well. After venturing across the world, Luigi finally makes it to Peach's castle to save her from Bowser's clutches. Peach's castle is an insane gauntlet, filled with countless obstacles in your way. With normal controls and a bit of finesse, none of this is all that particularly hard to get past. But one-handed, it feels like every jump is an insane but necessary risk. In addition to the normal obstacles, there are parts where Bowser Jr. will attack you as well to keep you on your toes. I found myself going back to previous shops around the world several times to give me the lives and items I needed to surpass the castle. It took some insane platforming and a decent pinch of luck to make it through this castle. After pulling the switch on Bowser, Kamek comes along with some magic, and you face off against Giga Bowser and Bowser Jr. together. Failing here means doing the last set of platforming all over again. To progress this battle, you need to Grand Theft Auto Bowser Jr.'s clown car to stomp Bowser's head. There are several attacks here that become very, very difficult to dodge when playing one-handed, and the amount of skidding and the difficulty to change direction that comes with it. Sometimes Bowser also likes to put you in some very tricky positions. With enough careful maneuvers and patience, however, Bowser was finally defeated. The challenge has been completed. Congratulations on wasting probably at least 5 hours of your life. Your reward is Luigi gets a kiss on the head. Honestly, I've never heard of something more worth it before. Man, what a wacky challenge this was. Maneuvering and changing directions while still pressing what buttons you needed to with this one-handed control scheme felt near impossible at times. It took some serious patience to make it past the more challenging levels. Literally any movement at all felt like ice physics. This was clearly not how the game was meant to be played. New Super Mario Bros. Can be a great time, especially with friends to work with or against each other as you trek through the levels. While I may not be as into the new Super Mario Bros. Titles as I used to be as a kid, they'll still always hold a special place in my heart. Though, to be fair, there hasn't been an actual new title in this series in over 7 years. As difficult of a challenge as it was, now it's something I can look back at and be proud that I have another challenge run achievement completed. Little did I know at the time that the next challenge would be leagues harder than the previous two, because the next would be Undertale Genocide Route with Oven Mitts. Challenge runs I do are streamed on Twitch, so be sure to stop by and hang out if you'd like to be a part of the shenanigans as they happen. Lately, we've been playing through The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on Hero Mode with a Cabela's Wiimote rifle, which is both mentally and physically painful, but it should at least make for a fun episode of Challenge Mode in the future. I hope you enjoyed the video. I look forward to continuing to develop this series further. With that, until next time, see ya. Whoa! 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 Oh my goodness! Huh! That was just the save of the century right there. Holy crap. My goodness, what a save. Wow.